Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Journey with me as I go down various rabbit holes to explore the best Plan B options for you. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today, and now on with the show. Welcome to the rabbit hole on the Plan B CRNA podcast. Throughout my journey in finding a Plan B, I've gone down numerous rabbit holes to figure out which one works for me. Since I've done some of this research already, I only think it's right to bring that information to fellow CRNAs to help aid in your search. As always, it's important for you, the listener, to do your own research and form your own opinions. Everyone's situation is unique, and a Plan B that works for one CRNA doesn't always work for another. Self-awareness is the key in any decision you make, since you must have an accurate grasp of your own strengths, weaknesses, and goals. Well, let's go, gang. Our rabbit hole topic of the day is dun, 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 house hacking. All right, so the concept of house hacking is relatively simple. You purchase a home and you rent out a room to cover part of the cost, or you purchase a duplex, triplex, or quadplex. You live in one side while others pay you rent from the other units. This sounds like an easy gig. You buy a place, rent out part of it to cover some expenses, and build equity. What's not to love? Well, of course, nothing is just that easy. This doesn't always work in every market, and it doesn't always provide the imagined benefits. But if I'm being honest, it really gets pretty close. So what do you need to consider before diving in? Well, crap, this is kind of a hard one. I'm not going to lie, I fully believe in this strategy for folks that are just starting out. Why the heck wouldn't you do this? If you're in college, you can just let your roommates pay the rent on your property. And why the heck not? Go to school and build some equity along the way. I know several folks that got started this way. They bought a home or duplex, let their roommates cover most of the mortgage and expenses, allowing them to live mostly free for several years. It's a freaking powerful thing. But there are ways to screw this up. For one, you should make sure that it isn't just cheaper for you to rent a place than it is to actually house hack. You don't have to positively cash flow, but it should at least save you some money along the way. Expensive markets like LA and New York City may not make sense because the only properties making numbers sense are in sketchy neighborhoods. Keep in mind that you actually have to live there for a while too. It all comes down to the numbers and your own personal situation. So what are some other considerations? Let's walk through them. Number one, this idea is hard to scale. Let's say you start with a duplex. You live there for a couple of years, then you move on to another duplex that you purchase and repeat. You might do this 3 or 4 times. At most, you've got 8 doors under management by the end of it, and each of them could make you anywhere between $100 to $250 per month. At max, that's $2,000 a month for nearly a decade of work, and you still have 20 plus years left on multiple mortgages. That's not bad. And you do have equity in those properties that you can deploy, but is that good enough of a return for you? Plus, what if you find the one? You get married and decide to have 3 kids, like me. Are you going to live in a duplex or a triplex with 3 kids? What are you, nuts? That sounds like a one-way ticket to separation for me. Not saying it can't be done, but you'd better have your spouse on board for that level of sacrifice. Number 2, when you own these properties, you are responsible for everything. Let's say you're living in your 3rd duplex, but your 1st duplex begins to experience wear and tear. Or let's say that 1st duplex goes completely vacant and the roof is leaking. Sure, you and your tenants can cover the mortgage on all 3, but do you have enough capital to replace the roof on the 1st home? Take your reserves into account. Number 3, markets. If you didn't invest in the right market, you may experience longer vacancies or higher expenses and taxes, both of which can negate your overall returns. I know this won't affect many investors, but you need to focus on areas where population and job flow are at least consistent to provide validity to your investment. Number 4, when you live somewhere, you may feel tempted to put a bunch of money into a place to fix it up. That's great, except that you probably don't need the smart systems, hardwood floors, wine cellar, and a multi-jet shower in a duplex. You don't want to get too fancy with your rentals. Number 5, so you want to be the landlord for your next door neighbor, do you? Try telling that to, well, your next door neighbor. Either you hide your true identity. Yeah, I pay the landlord every month too, Jim, and he's a real piece of work. Or you end up feeling like you owe favors because you're personally involved. Either you end up being too soft or too tough, neither of which feels great at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, you've got to remember that your own goal is to own a profitable property. You want it to cash flow for you now and over the long term. Speaking of long term, you'll need to cover that mortgage for the next 30 years or sell the property later on down the line. This is a long-term play. Okay, I think I've said long-term enough. I want to be truthful though, so here it is. This is simply a fantastic way to get started. The arguments against this method are pretty weak, and the upside is pretty huge when you're just starting out. So here's how you do this thing. Number 1, get a pre-approved owner-occupied 3 to 5% down loan. These are available, but you've got to hunt for them. Number 2, decide on your size. Are you renting out a bedroom or a duplex, triplex, etc.? Number 3, find a great real estate agent and explain exactly what you're looking for. Number 4, begin looking at properties and running the numbers. This is the beginning of a business, so it's time to start acting like it. Number 5, make some or many offers. You'll probably get turned down, but that's okay. Keep going and you will have an offer accepted soon enough. Number 6, get an offer accepted and close. Number 7, move in. You can live for cheap and manage the property. Number 8, live there for at least a year. Then you can move on if you want with minimal tax consequences. In short, this is most often a beginner's strategy. The method surely has its flaws, but going this route can really serve you in moving forward with your real estate investments. Most investors will not settle for investing in 3 to 4 duplexes, although you're certainly not in bad shape if you do. In fact, you'd be ahead of most folks in the country. If you are single or newlywed, don't sleep on this one. You can find huge benefits from moving forward with a house hacking strategy. I've already spoken with my own 10-year-old about this, and I'll talk it up with my other 2 children as they get older. It just makes sense for real estate investors who are just getting started. There is absolutely nothing wrong with getting your feet wet in this type of real estate. You can learn valuable lessons while also benefiting from having someone else pay for the equity of your property. For more information, make sure you check out BiggerPockets. They are the definitive resource for this type of material, and I've included those links in the show notes. You can also check out a couple of books, The House Hacking Strategy by Craig Curelop and Set for Life by Scott Trench. As always, I'd like to thank you for listening to the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you found value today, make sure you hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. We also want to hear from you. If you have a question, comment, or rabbit hole topic that you'd like me to cover in an upcoming podcast, make sure you rate and review on your podcast player. I check those all the time and cover those questions in future episodes. If you'd like to know more about me, make sure you find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram, or visit my website at www.oncallinvestments.com. Until next time, this is Bobby Jones signing off. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page. where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.